Hey, welcome to another video. In this video, I would like to show you how you can paint a tree. I'll show you some basic principles, basic techniques to paint a simple tree. I will also be using the foliage brush, which I shared earlier. I have selected two reference photos for this. I have two trees which we will be using in this video. I will share these reference photos with you as well. I'll make a new layer on top where I can paint our own tree. And as with all subjects that you would like to paint, it's very important to study your subject. So let's just take a look at the tree and think about what you're seeing. And this is something that you can do while you are taking a walk outside or while you're watching TV, doing whatever. You can look at subjects, trying to break them down, thinking about lighting, thinking about shape, and how you convey that in a painting. For this tree, for instance, I would think about the dark patches and light patches. Where do I see shadow? You can clearly see some light hitting on the leaves at the top, the top parts of the leaves, and you can see some gaps. You can look through the tree and we can see all these branches. You can see them through the leaves. So those are some characteristics that we want to paint in our painting. And what I'd like to do is start with the tree trunk and the branches. And let me just grab the Sketch It brush for that. But you can use whatever brush. You can also use an HB pencil or perhaps one of the charcoal brushes, for instance. Whatever you want to paint that tree trunk. And I'll go for let's go for a grayish brownish color, a bit like this. And I'll just, my brush is a bit big, well, that's okay. I'll make it smaller later. And I'll just sketch a tree trunk shape. You can follow that reference photo. Let me go to 25%. And of course, you'll have to guess a bit what that trunk looks like on the inside or behind the leaves. And as you move up, the branches will get thinner. So at the bottom you have this very thick tree trunk and the branches will get thinner and thinner. And we just want to have some branches that we will see through the foliage later. You don't have to make them perfect. And you don't have to copy the reference exactly, of course. You're just trying to understand the anatomy of the tree. And as we make smaller branches, you can make your brush a bit smaller as well. I'll go to 10%. My canvas is 2000 by 3000, by the way. Just add a few thin branches. I can see that my tree is getting a bit bigger than the original. Let me just clean up the trunk a bit here. So we can nicely see through here. I think we can start painting some leaves. So to do that, let me grab that foliage brush, which I shared with you. Where is it? There it is. And let me make a new layer below the branches first. And I'll grab a very dark green. And I'll start painting behind the tree branches first. Let me check my size. Yeah, that's fine. I have it at 3% right now. And I'll just lay in a base, but I'll leave some gaps because we want to be able to see through that tree. Because that's what we're seeing here in the reference photo, that you can see through the branches. Of course, these leaves are a little bit different than the ones in the original tree. As far as the shape goes, yeah, the shape is a little bit different. But that's okay. I can always make more foliage brushes with different shapes of leaves. Now we have a nice base and we can still see through the tree. So we can start painting leaves on top of the branches right now. So we'll go to layer 3 with the branches and then click plus to make a layer above it. And now I'll start using a lighter green. Perhaps something like this. It's always a bit of a guess. And now I'll start. Well, that's not light enough. Perhaps this. And I'll start adding patches of lighter leaves. And I will focus on the top planes. So I'll try to leave some dark patches. You want that shadow to be visible underneath. So especially at the top of the tree, you will see a lot more light and a lot more lighter leaves. Then we can make a new layer on top of this one and go even lighter. Also, I'll move a bit towards yellow. Just a bit like this. And I'll make the brush a little bit smaller. I go to 2%. Let's go to 1% even. And again, I'll focus on these top planes. I feel like we could use some more darker leaves in the background, so we could go to that first layer and let me just grab that dark color of the trunk. I'll just add some darker leaves. And if you feel like you've made too many gaps, or well, if you cover too many gaps, I mean, then you can always use a layer mask by clicking the layer, going to mask, and setting that leaf brush, that foliage brush, to black. And then you can paint on top of it to uncover some parts. And you can very easily build up your tree this way. You can switch between layers. You go back to the branches layer, and you could use the sketch it brush again, or whatever brush, and paint in more branches, for example. Adding more detail to your tree. And also, once you have this base made, once you have this base made with the foliage brush, you could also just go in with another brush and add more detail. You could make a new layer on top, and we could go for an even lighter green, a bit yellowish. And you could use the sketch it brush, for instance, and I want to go even lighter and add some more light patches, for instance. And just be sure to focus these light patches on the top planes and make sure that they have a shadow underneath, because of course the sunlight is coming from above here, shining on those top of the leaves. And by adding some lights with another brush, you can create a nice painterly tree. Or of course you could go into great detail, painting lots of individual leaves, but that's all up to you. Once you have a base where you can see that basic shape of the tree and you have those lights and shadows down, then it's easier to start adding detail. And I like a bit of a painterly look. You could also add some darker patches, work a bit on those shadows with a sketch brush, for instance. And trees are just very relaxing to paint. And also, they don't have a characteristic face. It's not like painting a portrait. No one will recognize the tree, probably. So it doesn't really matter if your tree looks a bit different. You can create your own, and it'll be fine. So it's a fun way to practice your painting skills. There's our first tree. Let's try another one. Let me just group this one like that. And we'll go to the next one. I'll make a new layer on top. And again, I will start with the trunk. And for this tree, you can see that there are a lot less gaps and that the majority of the light leaves are in the top area here. And here we can see a very dark patch. So I'll just draw the trunk first. Add some branches. You don't have to paint in too many because you can't see a whole lot of branches in that reference. Just make sure that you have a base of that tree trunk and some big branches before you start adding those leaves. Can clean up that trunk a little bit. And then again, I'll make a layer below that trunk to start painting those leaves. And I'll start with a very dark green again. just painting that basic shape of the tree. And brushes like this are great to get a certain effect really fast, but special brushes are not a thing that you should rely on. It's important to understand the subject you are painting first before trying to get an effect real fast. It's not like a cheat or something. Just once that you understand trees or whatever subject you're painting and using special brushes for, you need to understand the subject and know how you can paint it before moving to a shortcut, I think. You could paint just about anything with a single brush. Brushes like this are just pretty handy. Okay, we'll make a layer on top of the branches right now. And I'll go a bit lighter again. Making some leaves that will cover the branches now. And now let's go even lighter on a new layer on top of this one. Grab this light color. I'll make the brush 2%. And again, I will focus on those top parts, adding these light blotches and making sure that I also leave some shadow areas there. Because this top part of the tree is getting a lot of light, but still underneath those individual leaves and little branches you will find shadow areas. Those are the small shadow areas, and here you can see that very big shadow area. Little patches of light there. I'll go to 1%. I'm going to go a bit darker on that layer beneath. Just grab a very dark green to make these shadows a little bit more intense. And again, we can just use that Sketch It brush to add some nice light touches, some little dabs. Like there are some individual leaves. And we can also add to that painterly, a little bit of an impressionistic effect. So when painting trees, I like to, well, it's not always, I vary my ways, but when I paint an individual tree, I like to start off with that trunk and the branches, then make a layer underneath it to get that basic shape of the foliage, and then I'll build up layer by layer, adding lighter patches of leaves. And be sure to look at the lighting of the tree. Look at where you see those light patches. Usually light is hitting from above by the sun, and you'll see more shadow near the bottom of the tree. We can also switch to the darker color again, working a bit on creating some more intense shadows. And as you can see, I'll just stay zoomed out. And of course, once you're at this stage, you could just go in and create a very detailed tree. Once you have this, you could just pick up local colors. You got that base down by then. And you can create a tree in your own style. I like it like this. So let's look at our two trees that we just created. Let me put them next to each other. There they are. An easy way to use a special brush to create foliage and get a painterly tree in Procreate. But of course, these techniques also apply to other painting programs, or you could even use it when painting for real. Now, have fun creating your own trees. I'm looking forward to seeing your results and to talking to you here at Patreon. Thanks for watching.